Hey everybody, welcome back to my layout. This will be a layout update video for February 2020. Let's take a look at what's new on the layout. So I redid the front wall of the ice house, and the reason I did that was because actually the awesomeness of the internet, a viewer actually messaged me and said, hey, you know what, I've actually got a front kind of broadside of it. So shout out to Dave L, thank you very much for sending me that photo. So what that basically gave me was this. So I scaled down the photo, cropped it, and redid the front of the ice house with this image. So much better than what I had. If you remember, I had basically photoshopped my own, but now I've got a real image of it, and you can see in the detail here, it's really cool. It's got like an A3 little sign there beside the door, and just all the variation of color and everything that comes when you use a real image. So that looks way better. So we'll just take a quick look at that and see what it looks like. I had photoshopped an image for the roof, but I didn't have it the right size, so I finished that up, got it the correct length here, and I also touched up the top of the roof, basically just painting kind of where the white styrene was showing. I glued on the vent and got the shingles secured with just a kid's glue stick. And that finishes up that building. I'm really happy with it. No weathering required really. It's already weathered because it's an image of the real thing. So there's the trackside view of the ice house. As you can see, it looks way better, and it really captures that contrast between the south-facing wall and the east wall, which is what we're looking at. They actually look like they're two different colors, and that's reflected on the prototype. But for some reason, the east wall's got more of a purpley tinge to it compared to the red on the south wall. So that's a vast improvement from what I had before. And I'll just throw a quick before and after showing my photoshopped image versus the second image I got. And it really just captures the value. If you can get broadside photos of a structure that you're going to model, it's super valuable to get those photos when you can. So the next thing I worked on after finishing the ice house, I think I talked about it last month quite in detail, but I actually finished it this month. So I did that. I weathered 159 some ties and glued those all in with just white glue, and that's in preparation for the ballast going down. So that tie border is what separates the ballast from the pavement on the station platform. It's hard to get the whole look of it on camera, but when you're standing in front of it and kind of have the wide angle, it looks really neat because it's arrow straight and it runs the length of the entire platform. There's a little bit better of a view. There's a straight on view of the yard, and you can see that platform edging running all the way along the edge here of the main line, just like on the real thing. So here's just looking down at the other end of the yard. Eventually this will be the old speeder shed here. You can see the old rails coming out to the main line, and those ties extend all the way down here along the edge. So really a monotonous task, and it was kind of a pain, but I'm glad I did it. It's really going to look awesome once you get the ballast in there, and just having that random faded tie look. I think it'll really capture kind of the feel of the Banff station platform. So carrying on after I finished that platform edging, more tie related stuff, and really what I'm doing is I'm completing all the tasks I need to do before I begin the main ballasting of Banff Yard, kind of all the stuff that has to be done before ballast goes onto the tracks, and it's kind of a point of no return. So the next thing I figured I need to do is weather the ties, especially in the yard tracks here, so these 3 yard tracks and then the passing siding. So what I did was I weathered random ties using a couple different colors and a small paintbrush, and I just went along, just painted random ties to get a kind of a weathered look. So these are the 2 colors I used, and just using the caps and the paintbrush. So this color here, this is my like brand new tie look, and then I have a faded kind of a creamy beige color, almost a light gray with a little bit of a brown tinge to it. And if you mix these 2 together, you can get a lot of variation in a ton of different shades. So just by using the lid of this guy and taking a little bit here, mix a little bit of the black, get a ton of variation. So here's the bird's eye view. This is the main line, this is the passing track. So what I tried to do was, like, the main line would be better kept and it'd have more replaced ties on it. So I tried to do more of the black color on the main line and more of the faded and dark gray and light gray on the passing side, and kind of showing that they put a little more money into the main line than they do on the passing siding. And especially you'll see when we get to the yard tracks, it's even more kind of run down, like the 3-yard tracks, just like the real thing. They're not going to replace a lot of ties on yard tracks that don't see a lot of tonnage. So this is the main switch off the passing siding going into the yard. So for this one I thought it would it might be more of a newer switch since it's on the passing siding, but the other 3 switches going into the yard, if we just pan over there, you can see I did more faded ties on those. So the switch stand ties, they look new, just because they probably would keep those up. You can't really have a really old rotted tie if you're using it for holding the switch stand on, and then the rest is all kind of faded. And you can see here the main line has more ties replaced than the passing siding does. So let's roll this guy out of here, and then we can see the 5 tracks in the yard. And it may not seem like much, but this was a ton of work. Man, this took me, I don't want to know how many hours this took me. It was a solid week though, and I was coming down here for about an hour at a time, just listening to podcasts and painting ties. So here you can really see the contrast between the main line here, which is code 83, the passing siding, which is code 70, and then the 3 yard tracks here at Banff, which are code 55. And maintenance really hasn't been replacing many ties on this over the years. You can see it's a little bit neglected, just like the real thing. So here we're at the west end of the Banff yard, and same deal. You know, I kept the kind of consistent throughout. The main line's had quite a few ties replaced on it this past year. The other tracks not so much. The switches, I worked off some photos, and some of the switches, depending on what maintenance has been doing them, but with this section of the ties here, usually on the switches are dark, probably because they're greasing the switch points and everything, and so you end up with kind of a darker contrast. And you can see this on Google satellite photos, actually, is what I use to, just as a rough guideline of how to paint these things. So then here at Banff West, this is the mainline switch going into Banff. This is a number 8. Just like the real thing, usually the switches look pretty good on the main line. Lots of times they're like a big, they all come in one piece, so when they replace that, you're going to see the ties are going to be pretty much consistent throughout it. So I painted these ones all a darker kind of color. And if you look close, you can see I avoided painting the tie plate detail on the switches. So that's another reason for doing this. You can really make that detail that comes with these Pico and Microengineering's switches, make that detail pop out. So if we just zoom in here, you can see that by painting the dark parts of the ties, it really lets the detail show with the light color. And that was painted originally when I did the airbrushing of the rail, and I basically painted all the Flextrack one kind of rail grimy color. So this stuff remains the rail grimy color, which is what you want, but now I've gone and hand painted all the ties kind of a darker creosote color, and I even switched it up on these. You can see this one's a darker color than this one here beside it. So just to give that little bit of variation and randomness that you see in the prototype, and when you look at the overall finished product, it looks pretty good. So I did that all the way from staging over here all the way down past the end of the Banff section wall here. So now I'm ready. I can go ahead and ballast this entire 30-foot section of the layout. So that's what I'll be working on over the next month. So the last thing I did, well, I had these tie colors out that I was working on. I did a bunch more Scenic Ties, and you can see here's a kind of different variations of some I did. These are more of a dark kind of stain on them, and these are some really old ones with a light kind of beigey stain. They look really good though. I've got another 500 of them or so that I'm gonna, as I've got time and podcasts to listen to and patience, I'll be weathering those up, because if there's one thing about a railroad, there's ties laying absolutely everywhere. In Banff Yard, it's kind of a staging for maintenance away. They've got quite a bit of storage there, and there's lots of brand new ties as well as scrapped old, piles of old ties and stuff like that. So these Scenic Ties, I'm gonna need a lot of them, and I'm gonna keep making those kind of as time permits. So on the topic of Scenic Ties, just like the ones on the flat car there, I also tried doing some new ties, like brand new ties that have just been put on the right of way by maintenance away, left in a pile or whatever, getting ready for tie replacement, which I've seen a lot of, and I've taken a lot of pictures of the lag and sub of them staging. So this is what I came up with. They look pretty good. They're the same ties I used for the platform, but I just have a new method of getting rid of the spikes on this top, and I'll show you that. So real quick, I'll just share how I've been doing these ones, and it was kind of a trial and error. All I was doing before was using my hobby knife to cut these little spikes off. This is for hand laying track. If you ever wanted to do that with these ties, you can. They've got these little pre-cut spikes in them, and then they've got holes drilled in them as well, so you can put the spikes through there, you see. So that's all fine, but if you're doing scenic ties, if you think about the real thing, they're brand new ties. They're just a big piece of hardwood that's got no holes in it or anything, and it's just been soaked in creosote. So you just need the shape of the tie, and it just needs to be black. So what I found better than cutting them, because when I cut them, it makes them uneven. You kind of get these little divots in them. But if you just take a little piece of sandpaper, like 200 grit or something like that, and just sand these spikes down, you end up with this, and the sawdust actually fills in the holes on its own. So when you throw them in the stain, you end up with a solid tie and the end product. So going from this one here to this looks pretty good to me. That looks like that's a brand new tie sitting on the right of way, waiting to be replaced. So that's the trick. Use sandpaper to knock those spikes off of those. So those are done just using the same color that I was using for weathering. It's like a flat black, pretty much just straight black, a little bit of water in it, and just a tiny bit of white, just to kind of take away that midnight color and make it more of a flat. So that's what we've been up to over the past month, guys. This coming month I'm going to hopefully start the ballast on the yard, and that's going to take a while because it is, even though it's only 5-track yard, there's a lot of ballast to do, and it's, I don't know how many feet of track, but it's quite a bit. And at the same time, as I do the ballast step, I'll be doing the terrain, dirt, and all the scenery stuff, static grass, all at the same time. So a lot of work up ahead, but that's going to be a big transformation. I'm really looking forward to watching that take shape. So that'll wrap up this layout update video, guys. As always, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.